There are exactly two types of people who become war correspondents for interstellar conflicts. The first type consists of dedicated journalists who believe in the sacred duty of bearing witness to history's darkest moments. Noble souls who risk their lives to shine a light on the truth, no matter how ugly or complicated that truth might be. Then there's my type, the people who took the job because literally anywhere in the galaxy seemed better than covering another Twitter drama about whether AI-generated cat memes constitute copyright infringement. Tucker O'Malley, my editor, had said, tossing a holopad onto my desk. The device skidded across my collection of half-empty coffee cups, scattering them like caffeinated bowling pins. How'd you like to cover the Rigellian Centaurian War? The what now, I asked, trying to mop up the coffee with my sleeve while pretending that was totally what I meant to do. Big conflict out in the Novus Prime system. Humans are officially neutral observers, so we can get press credentials, pays terrible, living conditions are worse, and there's a non-zero chance you'll get vaporized by experimental weapons technology. I thought about the 300 think pieces about social media ethics sitting in my inbox, waiting to be summarized into easily digestible content chunks. I thought about the upcoming series of articles I was supposed to write about the philosophical implications of virtual reality influencers. I looked at my editor's face, which wore the expression of someone who'd already lost 3 reporters to the much more appealing career of professional space piracy. When do I leave? Yesterday, she said, already walking away. And O'Malley? Try not to start another diplomatic incident. We're still dealing with the fallout from that piece you wrote about the Andromedans' religious ceremonies. How was I supposed to know their sacred ritual was different from their interpretive dance about waste management? They were literally handling radioactive materials. The hazmat suits threw me off. That's how I ended up on Novus Prime, a charming little death world where the local equivalent of mosquitoes are the size of house cats and twice as mean. The planet's main selling point, according to the tourism board that went defunct roughly 6 hours into the war, was its unique crystalline atmosphere. This turned out to be a fancy way of saying the air occasionally turns into razor-sharp shards that will absolutely mess up your whole day. My first encounter with this charming meteorological phenomenon came during my landing. The shuttle pilot, a grizzled veteran named Captain Rodriguez who'd clearly lost her ability to feel fear sometime during the First Contact War, casually mentioned that we might experience some atmospheric turbulence. Define some, I said, clutching my seat as the shuttle performed what I'm pretty sure was an illegal barrel roll. Well, she drawled, banking hard to avoid what looked like a floating cluster of diamonds. You see that windshield? The reinforced plasma glass rated for deep space travel. Yeah, those crystals out there? They can cut through it like tissue paper. But don't worry, we've got backup windshields. How many backups? 2 less than we started with, she grinned. Welcome to journalism on the frontier, kid. The Rigellians and Centaurians had been fighting over this delightful resort destination for the better part of a standard galactic year. Neither side particularly wanted Novus Prime, they just really didn't want the other side to have it. It was like watching 2 people fight over the last piece of cake at a party, except neither of them actually likes cake, and the cake is trying to kill them. The Rigellians were your classic militaristic empire types, lots of sharp angles in their architecture, uniforms that looked like they were designed by someone who thought shoulder spikes were the height of fashion, and an absolutely fascinating cultural inability to understand the concept of small talk. Every conversation with a Rigellian felt like being interviewed for a job you didn't apply for while simultaneously being court-martialed. I learned this the hard way during my first press briefing with Commander Vex Thor of the 7th Rigellian Battle Fleet. State your purpose, he demanded as I entered his office. I'm the New Earth correspondent. We had an appointment. Those statements are questions. Are you uncertain of your own identity and schedule? No, I'm just making conversation. You continue to speak in questions. This is inefficient. You will cease this behavior immediately. Sure thing, I muttered, then made the mistake of adding, nice weather we're having. I spent the next 2 hours being interrogated about Earth's weather control capabilities and whether my question indicated an imminent meteorological assault. The Centaurians, on the other hand, were all about organic shapes, flowing robes, and the firm belief that every single conflict could be resolved through interpretive dance. This worked about as well as you'd expect in a war zone. Their battle tactics mostly involved trying to enlighten the enemy into submission through performance art pieces about the futility of violence, occasionally punctuated by actual violence when that didn't work. My first Centaurian press conference opened with a 3-hour interpretive dance about the nature of journalism. I'm still not entirely sure if I was supposed to take notes or join in, but I did learn that apparently my profession involves a lot of spinning and something that looked suspiciously like the Macarena. Lieutenant Zephyr, my primary Centaurian contact, insisted on conducting all our interviews while floating in anti-gravity meditation chambers. To properly convey the weight of these events, she explained, we must first free ourselves from the weight of convention. Couldn't we just sit at a desk? Desk? How delightfully primitive. Tell me, does this desk represent humanity's attachment to rigid structures of thought? My job was to observe, document, and try very hard not to get killed while doing either. The humans' neutral status in the conflict was based entirely on the fact that both sides found us too confusing to bother with. We were the galactic equivalent of that one coworker everyone invites to meetings but nobody really knows what they do. I set up my base of operations in what used to be a local administrative building, now serving as a sort of demilitarized zone because neither army could figure out how to operate the coffee maker in the break room. This turned out to be a surprisingly effective defense strategy. Nothing stops an advancing army like the mystery of which button makes the espresso and which one might trigger the self-destruct sequence. The building itself was a perfect metaphor for the war, half-sharp Rigellian angles, half-flowing Centaurian curves, and entirely held together by what I strongly suspected was spite and industrial-strength space duct tape. The previous occupants had left in such a hurry that there were still half-finished reports on the desks, most of them about the proper filing procedure for complaints about the filing procedure for complaints. My office, if you could call it that, was a converted supply closet on the 3rd floor. I chose it specifically because it had no windows, harder for the crystalline atmosphere to kill me, was equidistant from both the Rigellian and Centaurian sectors' diplomatic neutrality, and most importantly, was right next to the only working coffee machine in the building's survival priorities. And that's where I was, filing another thrilling report about the tactical significance of the day's interpretive dance battles, when everything went sideways in the most festive way possible. But we'll get to that part. First, you need to understand just how monumentally weird things already were before the man in the red suit showed up. Because trust me, once Santa Claus enters the picture, you're going to want some context for the baseline level of absurdity we were working with here. For instance, there was the great cafeteria incident, where a Rigellian general and a Centaurian diplomat nearly started a new front in the war, over whether the mysterious earth substance known as Jello was a food or a form of primitive art. The Centaurians insisted it was clearly an expression of humanity's understanding of the fluid nature of reality. The Rigellians maintained it was a tactical nutrition delivery system. Both sides somehow interpreted this as a grave insult to their respective cultures. Or the time a group of Centaurian peace activists attempted to end the war by staging a zero-gravity ballet about the futility of conflict, only to accidentally trigger every combat drone in a 3-mile radius because, as it turns out, their graceful dance movements matched the Rigellian combat activation protocols perfectly. Life lesson number 1: when the universe decides to get weird on you, it doesn't start with the big stuff. It eases you in, like a frog in slowly boiling water. Except the water is made of crystallized death air and the frog is your last remaining grip on sanity. Welcome to war journalism, kids. Stick around, it gets better. Or worse. Definitely one of those. And you know what the really crazy part is? None of this, not the crystalline reign of death, not the interpretive dance battles, not even the great Jello diplomatic crisis, none of it came close to preparing me for what happened that fateful Christmas Eve on Novus Prime. But then again, how could it have? Fun fact about space: there's no real way to mark seasons out here. No autumn leaves changing color, no spring flowers blooming, and definitely no white Christmas, unless you count the crystalline death flakes constantly trying to exfoliate you down to the bone. But humans, being the stubborn creatures we are, insist on keeping our calendars anyway, which is why I knew it was Christmas Eve when everything went wrong in the most wonderful way possible. I was doing my usual evening routine, trying to make sense of my notes from the day's events while the coffee maker made sounds that definitely weren't in its user manual. The Rigellians had spent the morning conducting precision military drills, which the Centaurians had interpreted as an innovative form of line dancing and responded to with an impromptu festival of peace. This had led to the Rigellians believing they were being mocked through interpretive dance, which, to be fair, they absolutely were. Commander Klix, the newly appointed Rigellian field commander, had stormed into my office earlier demanding I document this egregious violation of proper military protocol. They were. Spinning Klix's eye stalks twitched with each word, their regulation-perfect uniform somehow managing to look even more starched than usual, in non-regulation patterns. Maybe they were just expressing themselves, I suggested, immediately regretting my choice of words. Expression is inefficient. Why use movement when written reports exist? Klix slammed a stack of forms on my desk. Speaking of which, I require you to fill out Form 27B6 regarding your observation of their chaos-inducing gyrations. Don't you think that's a bit? Form 27B6 must be submitted in triplicate, with supporting documentation including but not limited to a frame-by-frame analysis of all non-regulation dance moves and their potential tactical implications. I was saved from death by paperwork by the arrival of Lieutenant Pax, my regular Centaurian contact, who floated into my office in their customary cloud of bioluminescent spores. Tucker, darling Pax's tendrils waved in what I'd learned to interpret as either extreme excitement or mild digestive distress. Did you witness our celebration of spontaneous joy and unity this morning? Wasn't it simply transcendent? Klix's eye stalks went rigid. That was a calculated act of tactical disrespect, and you know it. Oh, my dear rigid one, Pax sighed, their bioluminescence shifting to what I recognized as their patronizing pastels palette. Everything doesn't have to be calculated. Sometimes the universe simply calls us to dance. The universe, Klix ground out, has better things to do than call anyone to dance. I was about to attempt my usual diplomatic intervention, which mostly involved pretending to choke on coffee until they got worried enough to stop arguing when every alarm in the building went off at once. The sound was like 1,000 angry cats being run through a woodchipper that was itself being run through a larger woodchipper. Both Klix and Pax immediately went into their species' respective versions of high alert. Klix snapped to attention so hard I heard their spine crack, while Pax's bioluminescence shifted to what they called their serious magenta. Unidentified energy signature detected. The announcement system blared in 3 different languages, followed by what I'm pretty sure was interpretive whale song because someone had let the Centaurians program part of the alert system. Location Klix barked into their communicator. The response came back garbled, but I distinctly heard the words upper atmosphere and impossible readings. Pax's tendrils were now twisted into what I recognized as their serious contemplation of existential matters configuration. The energy pattern. It's like nothing in our databases. It's harmonious, but also chaotic. The resonance is. Spit it out, Klix demanded. It's festive. Pax sounded as confused as a being with no fixed facial features could sound. That's when my personal communicator decided to join the party. The screen lit up with an incoming message from Captain Rodriguez. O'Malley, get your ass to the control room. You're going to want to see this. Bring your camera, and maybe some milk and cookies. Don't ask why. Just trust me on this one. I grabbed my gear and followed Klix and Pax, who were still arguing about proper emergency response protocols. Klix insisted on following the standard operating procedure for unidentified aerial phenomena. Pax wanted to organize an impromptu interpretive dance to welcome whatever it was with open hearts and positive energy. We arrived at the control room to find it in complete chaos. The main view screen was lit up like a Christmas tree, which, in retrospect, should have been my first clue. Red blips appeared and disappeared across the atmospheric radar, moving in patterns that made absolutely no sense. It's too fast, one of the Rigellian technicians reported. Nothing can maneuver like that, especially not in crystalline atmosphere conditions. The energy signature, a Centaurian sensor specialist, swayed in their anti-gravity chair, tendrils waving in confusion. It's jolly. Jolly is not a scientific measurement, Klix roared. But it is an accurate one, Pax countered. Look at the harmonic resonance patterns. They're practically jingling. That's when I noticed something that made my jaw drop. Among the chaos of energy readings and radar blips, a very distinct pattern was emerging. The unidentified object was moving across the planet's surface in a very specific way, almost as if it was making deliveries. Oh no, I whispered, as the realization hit me. Oh ho, ho ho no. What Clicks and Pax demanded simultaneously. Before I could answer, the entire building shook with what sounded suspiciously like hooves on the roof. And that's when things got really weird. Here's a sentence I never thought I'd write in a war correspondent. Santa Claus crash-landed his sleigh into a demilitarized zone on an alien planet because Rudolph's nose got confused by the crystalline atmosphere. But let's back up about 30 seconds, to the moment when everyone in the control room simultaneously realized that something was coming down the ventilation shaft. Something big. Defensive positions, Clicks barked, their eye stalks swiveling toward the ceiling vent. Welcome formation, Pax countered, their tendrils already moving in what I recognized as the opening sequence of the dance of gracious hospitality to unexpected guests who arrived through non-traditional entrances. The vent cover burst open in a shower of sparkles that definitely weren't regulation issue, and out tumbled the least expected figure in galactic military history. He was wearing a red suit with white trim. This was normal enough. What wasn't normal was the fact that the suit appeared to be made of some kind of self-repairing smart fabric that automatically adapted to protect its wearer from the crystalline atmosphere. His beard was white and full, but it seemed to shimmer with its own internal light source. And his eyes, well, let's just say they twinkled in a way that probably violated several laws of physics. Ho ho oh, my Santa Claus said, brushing crystalline debris off his suit. That was a bit more exciting than usual. Rudolph's having some trouble with the local atmospheric conditions. Something about the crystals refracting his nose light in unexpected ways. Mrs. Claus always says I should update to GPS, but you know how it is with tradition. The room erupted into chaos. Clicks's troops had their weapons drawn, but looked increasingly uncertain about whether they should be pointing them at the intruder or questioning their own sanity. The Centaurians had already begun a spontaneous ceremonial dance titled Welcome to the Mysterious Red-Clad One Who Speaks of Luminescent Navigation Animals. This is clearly some kind of psychological warfare, Clicks decided, their eye stalks twitching. An attempt to destabilize our forces through pure confusion. But look at his aura, Pax exclaimed. Such a perfect harmony of joy and wisdom. Though I must say the red clashes somewhat with the universal cosmic frequency. I stepped forward, feeling like I should probably prevent an interstellar incident. Everyone calm down. I can explain this. Well, actually, I can't explain this at all, but I can at least provide context. Santa turned to me with a smile that somehow managed to be both jolly and slightly mischievous. Ah, Tucker O'Malley. Don't sell yourself short, you made the nice list this year. Though that article about the Andromedan religious ceremonies was a bit naughty. How did you never mind? I turned to the others. This is Santa Claus. He's A. Well, he's A. How exactly do you explain Santa to beings who have never heard of Christmas? Try it sometime. It's like trying to explain interpretive dance to a Rigellian or military discipline to a Centaurian. He's an Earth-based entity who traditionally enters residences through alternative access points to deliver gifts to well-behaved humans during a specific annual celebration. I tried. Clicks's eye stalks crossed slightly. You allow an unknown entity regular unauthorized access to your dwellings. For the purpose of gift-giving, Pax's tendrils waved excitedly. How wonderfully chaotic. Though surely there must be some kind of interpretive dance involved. Actually, Santa interjected. Reaching into his bag, I believe I have something for both of you. What happened next defied every known law of physics, probability, and common sense. Santa's bag, which looked like it couldn't hold more than a few dozen packages, somehow produced exactly what each person in the room needed most, though not necessarily what they wanted. For Clicks, he pulled out what appeared to be a snow globe. But inside, instead of snow, were swirling patterns that moved in perfect, precise military formations that gradually transformed into a beautiful dance. Sometimes, Santa said kindly, order can arise from chaos, and chaos can create its own kind of order. Clicks stared at the globe, their eye stalks moving in an uncharacteristically fluid motion. For Pax, he produced what looked like a crystal prism. When light passed through it, it created patterns that were completely random, yet somehow mathematically perfect. And sometimes, Santa continued, structure can enhance creativity rather than limit it. Pax's bioluminescence shifted through colors I'm pretty sure they'd never displayed before. But why are you here? I finally managed to ask. This is a war zone, not exactly your usual territory. Santa's eyes twinkled even more intensely, which I wouldn't have thought possible. My dear boy, we're better to deliver the gift of peace than where it's needed most. Besides, he added with a wink, he'd be surprised how many military bases have chimneys. Though I must say, the crystalline atmosphere here adds an interesting challenge to the whole rooftop landing situation. As if on cue, there was a tremendous crash from above, followed by what sounded suspiciously like reindeer hooves skidding on crystalline ice. Ah, Santa said cheerfully. That would be Rudolph finally figuring out how to compensate for the light refraction. If you'll excuse me, I have quite a few more stops to make. The Rigellian 7th Fleet has been particularly good this year, and the Centaurian Peace Dance Chorus has shown remarkable improvement in their understanding of linear time. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Tucker, the coffee maker in your office, the green button makes espresso. The red one actually does trigger the self-destruct sequence. Thought you might want to know that. And with that, he somehow went back up the ventilation shaft, despite it being clearly too small to accommodate him. The sound of sleigh bells faded into the crystalline atmosphere, leaving behind a room full of stunned aliens, one seriously confused human journalist, and a lot of questions about the laws of physics. Iclix announced formally, we'll need to file a report about this. Ipax declared dreamily, we'll need to choreograph an entirely new dance cycle. And me? I needed a drink. But first, I had to figure out how to write up this incident without getting fired, committed to a psychiatric facility, or both. The really weird part? This was just the beginning. Have you ever tried explaining to an alien military commander why a magical man in a red suit might be distributing presents in a war zone? It's exactly as fun as it sounds, especially when said commander has just received a gift that challenges their entire worldview. This is clearly a violation of the rules of engagement, Clix insisted, while unconsciously cradling their snow globe like it might disappear if they let go. Unauthorized gift-giving during active combat operations must be filed under Form 89C4, suspicious acts of generosity with potential tactical implications. You're missing the point, Pax argued, their tendrils still swaying in time with the light patterns from their new prism. This is obviously a manifestation of the universal harmony attempting to bring balance to our conflict through the medium of thoughtfully selected presence. The really interesting part. Both of them were still clutching their gifts while arguing about whether or not they should be suspicious of said gifts. But that was just the start. Reports began flooding in from across the planet. Santa, it seemed, was making good on his promise to visit everyone. And I mean everyone.
The Rigellians 7th Fleet received a set of precision-engineered toys that transformed from perfect military formations into musical instruments. The Centaurian Peace Dance Corps got gravity-defying ballet shoes that only worked when the wearer was moving in tactically sound patterns. General Vorks of the Rigellian High Command received a meditation cushion that hummed in perfect military time. High choreographer Zena of the Centaurian Strategic Dance Division got a manual titled The Art of War Now with interpretive dance notation. These gifts, a Rigellian analyst reported, their voice trembling with confusion. They appear to be teaching us something. But what's the tactical advantage, Clix demanded, still watching the patterns in their snow globe with something approaching wonder. Perhaps Pax suggested, watching light fractal through their prism, the tactical advantage is learning to think beyond tactics. I was documenting everything, of course. This was either going to be the story of the century or my final report before being committed to the journalism asylum for the chronically over-imaginative. The really strange part? Every time I tried to take a picture of one of the gifts, my camera would only capture an image of exactly what each species needed to see to take the first step toward understanding the other.
When I photographed the Rigellian fleet's new toys, the image showed complex mathematical proofs demonstrating the tactical efficiency of certain dance movements. When I snapped a picture of the Centaurians' new ballet shoes, the photos contained detailed diagrams showing how their most spiritual dances accidentally mapped perfectly to advanced military strategies. That's when Captain Rodriguez burst into my office, clutching what appeared to be a snow globe of her own. Inside it, tiny spaceships performed maneuvers that were simultaneously perfect attack formations and an intricate aerial ballet. "O'Malley," she said, her voice unusually soft, "you're seeing all this too, right? I'm not just hallucinating from too many atmospheric stabilizers." "If you're hallucinating, we all are," I assured her. "And it's about to get weirder." because that's when both the Rigellian and Centaurian high commands made their moves. If there was some kind of tactical or spiritual advantage to be gained from these gifts, neither side wanted the other to get it first. The Rigellians launched Operation Gift Analysis, with teams of scientists attempting to reverse engineer the presents for potential military applications. They set up a dedicated research facility just to study the snow globes, convinced the swirling patterns must contain encrypted tactical data. Not to be outdone, the Centaurians established the Bureau of Harmonious Gift Interpretation, with their most experienced spiritual advisors attempting to channel the deeper meaning of their presence through increasingly elaborate interpretive dances. Both sides also tried to track down Santa himself, which went about as well as you'd expect. The Rigellians deployed their most advanced tracking systems, only to find that Santa's flight path seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, some of which their computers insisted didn't actually exist. The Centaurians attempted to commune with Santa through a synchronized meditation dance involving their entire core, only to receive what they described as feelings of gentle amusement and cookie cravings. Meanwhile, I was getting reports from both armies that something strange was happening to their troops. Rigellian soldiers were being caught humming while doing their drills. Centaurian dancers were unconsciously falling into perfect military formations during their spiritual exercises. "This is worse than we thought," Clix declared during an emergency meeting, their eye stalks swiveling in distress. "Our troops are displaying symptoms of creativity, and ours are developing a concerning appreciation for structure," Pax added, their bioluminescence pulsing with worry. "Next thing you know, they'll be filing reports voluntarily. Our soldiers have started asking why when given orders," Clix continued, shuddering. "Our dancers have begun submitting choreography in advance," Pax's tendrils twisted in distress. That's when I noticed something that neither of them seemed to be aware of. While complaining about these developments, Clix's eye stalks were swaying in perfect rhythm with Pax's bioluminescent pulses. They had, without realizing it, fallen into perfect harmony. I checked my notes. Similar reports were coming in from across the planet. Rigellian and Centaurian units that had been fighting for months were suddenly finding weird little points of connection. A Rigellian sergeant and a Centaurian dance captain had apparently spent 3 hours arguing about whether precision marching could be considered a form of dance, only to conclude that they were both right. "I believe," I said carefully, "that this might be the point." "What point?" they asked in perfect unison, then looked at each other in horror. Think about it. Every gift seems designed to help each recipient understand the other side's perspective. It's like cultural cross-pollination via cosmic Christmas spirit. "That's ridiculous," Clix scoffed, their eye stalks still swaying rhythmically.
That's beautiful, Pax sighed, their bioluminescence pulsing in military precision.
And that's when the next wave of presents arrived. Because apparently Santa wasn't done with us yet, not by a long shot. The really interesting question wasn't what else Santa had planned for us. The really interesting question was, were we ready for it? Based on how things were going so far, I had a feeling the answer was going to be ho 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 no. If you think normal politics is complicated, try covering an interstellar peace negotiation mediated by Santa Claus. Especially when both sides are simultaneously trying to weaponize Christmas spirit while pretending they're not. The second wave of gifts turned out to be even more diabolically clever than the first. Santa, it seemed, had decided to kick things up a notch. The Rigellian High Command received a complete set of tactical analysis readings of every Centaurian dance movement ever performed. The data proved, through absolutely irrefutable mathematics, that their seemingly chaotic dances were actually operating on principles of quantum-level precision that made Rigellian military formations look sloppy in comparison. Meanwhile, the Centaurian Strategic Dance Division got detailed choreographic breakdowns of classic Rigellian battle maneuvers, revealing that their most effective military strategies followed the exact same patterns as ancient Centaurian spiritual dances. I found Commander Clix in their office, surrounded by holographic projections of dance sequences, their eye stalks practically tied in knots as they tried to follow the movements. "This is impossible," they muttered, watching a replay of a Centaurian peace ritual. "The quantum variability quotient of this movement sequence. It's perfect. Too perfect. Look at this probability curve." The curve in question did look suspiciously like a candy cane. Across the building, PAX had transformed their meditation chamber into what they called a tactical interpretation space. They were attempting to translate Rigellian battle formations into interpretive dance, with surprisingly successful results. The beauty of it, they exclaimed, their tendrils forming what I now recognized as a perfect geometric representation of a pincer movement, is that they've been dancing all along. They just call it strategic deployment patterns. That's when both sides decided to get clever. Because if there's one thing you can count on in a war, it's that someone will try to weaponize everything, even Christmas. The Rigellians launched Project North Pole, a tactical initiative aimed at quantifying and militarizing the strategic advantages of holiday cheer. They set up a research lab dedicated to analyzing the aerodynamic properties of sleigh-based delivery systems and the tactical applications of chimney-based infiltration techniques. Think about it, one Rigellian scientist explained to me their eye stalks practically vibrating with excitement. A delivery system that can visit every location in a given theater of operations in a single night. The strategic implications are enormous. You do realize that's not really the point of I tried to interrupt. We've already begun prototype development of combat-ready candy canes and tactical tinsel dispensers. Meanwhile, the Centaurians established the Ministry of Festive Harmonics, dedicated to channeling what they called the metaphysical resonance of St. Nicholas consciousness through increasingly elaborate holiday-themed interpretive dances. We're developing a new performance piece, PAX told me proudly. It's called the Nutcracker, but make it quantum a interpretive journey through multi-dimensional gift-giving paradigms.
That's certainly a title.
The first act alone requires 17 different dimensions of movement, though we're having some trouble with the Sugar Plum Fairy's quantum entanglement sequence. But here's the thing about trying to weaponize Christmas magic: it has a way of weaponizing you right back. In the nicest possible way, of course. The Rigellian scientists studying tactical tinsel deployments started getting distracted by how pretty it looked. The Centaurian quantum dance specialists began incorporating military precision into their routines because it just felt right. And then there were the cookies. Nobody quite knew where they came from, but plates of perfectly baked cookies kept appearing in meeting rooms right when tensions were highest. They were somehow simultaneously the favorite traditional desserts of both species, despite the fact that Rigellians and Centaurians had completely different digestive systems. This is clearly some form of chemical warfare, cliques declared, reaching for their third cookie. We should analyze these for tactical significance. The universal harmony of shared sustenance, PAX agreed, also reaching for another cookie. Though I must say, the tactical distribution pattern of the chocolate chips is remarkably efficient. That's when I noticed something odd about my notes. Every time I wrote down something antagonistic anyone said, it somehow transformed into a more constructive version by the time I read it back. Military threats became suggestions for joint training exercises. Diplomatic ultimatums turned into party invitations. Your forces have 24 hours to surrender became your forces are cordially invited to a 24-hour cultural exchange program. This means war transformed into this means we should probably schedule a meeting. Even the crystalline atmosphere seemed to be getting into the spirit, forming patterns that looked suspiciously like snowflakes instead of its usual deadly shards. It all came to a head during what was supposed to be a high-level strategic meeting between both sides. Cliques arrived with a detailed presentation about military capabilities, only to find that their data slides had somehow been set to music. PAX had prepared an interpretive dance about spiritual sovereignty, only to discover that their movements kept falling into perfect military formations. And there, in the middle of the conference table, was a plate of fresh cookies and a note written in suspiciously jolly handwriting. Sometimes the best strategy is to stop strategizing. Sometimes the best dance is to stop dancing. Sometimes you just need to sit down, have a cookie, and admit that maybe, just maybe, you're both a little bit right and a little bit wrong. P.S. The coffee maker's green button really does make excellent espresso. The room went silent except for the sound of crunching cookies. And that's when the real Christmas miracle began to take shape. Though personally I think Santa had been orchestrating this particular miracle since the moment he crashed through our ventilation system. The really interesting part: this wasn't even the strangest thing that would happen that day. But that story involves a reindeer-powered peace treaty, a quantum-entangled Christmas carol, and the first ever joint Rigellian Centaurian tactical dance performance. And believe me, you're going to want to hear about that. You've never truly experienced diplomacy until you've watched a peace treaty being drafted on the back of Christmas wrapping paper, signed with candy canes, and officially ratified through the medium of interpretive dance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After the cookie incident, something remarkable happened in that conference room. Cliques and Pax, still munching on their impossibly delicious treats, started actually talking to each other. Not arguing, not posturing, just talking. Talking. These cookies cliques observed, their eye stalks moving thoughtfully. They follow the golden ratio in their chocolate chip distribution. Yes, Pax agreed, their bioluminescence pulsing gently, and yet they also maintain a perfect harmony of flavors that defies mathematical explanation. Like order and chaos,
Structure and freedom.
they looked at each other as if seeing their counterpart for the first time. Perhaps Click said slowly, there is a certain logic to interpretive dance. And perhaps Pax admitted, there is a certain poetry to military precision. That's when it happened. The event that would later be recorded in official documents as the Great Holiday Harmony but would be known colloquially as the night everyone finally got the point. Rudolph landed on the roof again. This time, instead of crashing, he executed a perfect landing that somehow combined military precision with balletic grace. The crystalline atmosphere parted around his nose like a curtain, creating a light show that made both species' visual organs go wide with wonder. Santa stepped out of the chimney, which, I should note, our building definitely didn't have before that moment, carrying what looked like a peace treaty. The document was written in 3 languages: Rigellian, Centaurian, and what appeared to be festive calligraphy that somehow translated perfectly into both. Now then, Santa said, setting up a small table that definitely hadn't been there before, shall we make this official? What followed was the most unusual peace negotiation in galactic history. The treaty terms were simple, yet profound. All military maneuvers must include at least one dance element. All interpretive dances must maintain minimum tactical efficiency standards. Cookie breaks are mandatory during all future negotiations. Both sides agreed to annual cultural exchange programs, coincidentally scheduled around December 24th Earth time. But how will we implement these changes? Cliques wondered, their military minds still trying to find practical solutions. How will we maintain our spiritual integrity? Pax worried, their tendrils twisting anxiously. Santa's eyes twinkled. I believe a demonstration is in order. He pulled out what looked like a conductor's baton, but it sparkled like a candy cane. With a wave, music filled the air, a perfect blend of military marches and ethereal harmonies. And then something amazing happened. Everyone in the room found themselves participating in what could only be described as a tactical interpretive dance flash mob. Rigellian officers moved with flowing grace while maintaining perfect formation. Centaurian dancers executed precise military maneuvers while radiating spiritual harmony. Even I found myself caught up in it, somehow performing a perfect combination of martial arts and modern dance that I'm pretty sure would have won both a war and a reality show competition. The treaty was signed to the rhythm of what would later be known as the Carol of the Bells and Whistles military grade. As Santa prepared to leave, he turned to me with that knowing twinkle in his eye. You got all that, Mr. O'Malley? I looked down at my notes, which had somehow organized themselves into both a precise military report and a flowing poem. I think so. But who's going to believe this?
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, he chuckled. The best stories have a way of making people believe. Besides, he added with a wink, I left you a little something to help.
In my office, I found a typewriter that somehow interfaced perfectly with both Rigellian and Centaurian communication systems. Every time I typed up my report, it automatically translated into exactly what each reader needed to see to understand, not just the words, but the spirit of what had happened. The Rigellians saw a detailed tactical analysis of how peace increased operational efficiency. The Centaurians read a flowing philosophical treatise on the harmony of opposing forces. And humans? Well, they got this story. 1 year later, I attended the first annual Rigellian Centaurian Holiday Spectacular. The highlight was a joint performance piece called the Nutcracker Suite Tactical Edition, featuring precision-guided sugar plum fairies and a mouse king who executed brilliant military strategies through interpretive dance. Clicks and Paxco choreographed the whole thing. They're still arguing about whether it's a military exercise set to music or a ballet with strategic implications, but now they do it over cookies and coffee green button only. As for Santa, well, let's just say that every Christmas Eve, the planetary defense systems pick up some very interesting readings. The Rigellians claim they're monitoring strategic gift deployment patterns. The Centaurians insist they're tracking the harmonic resonance of joy. Me? I just make sure to leave out cookies. Military-grade ones, arranged in tactically sound patterns, with sprinkles distributed according to the principles of interpretive geometry. Because if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that sometimes the best way to end a war isn't through force or philosophy, but through the simple act of helping people see themselves in their enemies. That, and apparently Santa's gift list is a lot longer than anyone on Earth ever imagined. Oh, and one more thing, if you ever find yourself in an intergalactic conflict, pay attention to the coffee maker buttons. You never know when Santa might have left you a user manual. After all, peace on Earth is good, but peace in the galaxy? That's a whole other level of Christmas miracle. End report. Filed by Tucker O'Malley. War correspondent retired. Current title Chief Holiday Operations Analyst. Joint Rigellian-Centaurian Cultural Exchange Program. Yes. Yes, this report is printed on color-changing paper that smells like peppermint. Some things you just can't explain with military precision or interpretive dance. Sometimes you just have to believe in a little Christmas magic, even in a war zone.